All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're digging into a really powerful thought experiment. It's all about trust, the positions we take in life, and what it really means to have an open door. So let's kick things off with a big question. What comes first? Is it the hunt for some absolute truth, or is it the simple, everyday act of trust? Now, you might think the answer is obvious, but the material we're looking at today suggests we might have it all backwards. And that leads us right to the core idea of this whole explainer. Trust is completely unavoidable. I mean, think about it. It comes before we can be certain of pretty much anything. You trust your senses when you cross the street? You trust your own memory to even have an identity? Heck, even when you doubt something, you have to trust your own ability to reason. Trust is just the air we breathe. Okay, so if we're all on board that trust is something we just do all the time, then the real question isn't if we trust, it's how we choose to stand when trust is asked of us. And that's the first big part of what we're exploring. All right, here's where we get to the thought experiment. Just imagine a claim, let's use a classic one, God exists, is put right in the middle of a public square for everyone to see. No one's forcing it on you, it's just there for you to consider. Nothing's been proven, and nobody's demanding anything. So once you've actually understood that claim, you can't just not react, right? A response is going to happen one way or another. And the argument here is that there are really three basic ways a person can stand in relation to it. First up, you've got the believer. This is the person who says, yep, I trust this. And by saying that, they take on full responsibility for that decision. Now, this isn't about being blindly certain. It's about making a committed choice and owning it completely. Then you have the disbeliever. And this position is just as clear-cut. The disbeliever looks at the claim and says, nope, I judge this is not worthy of my trust. It's an active rejection, you know? It's not because they're confused or need more info. They are also taking a clear stand and are just as accountable for it. And finally, there's the agnostic. In its best, most honest form, this is the person who says, you know what? I see the claim, but I just don't know how to trust it yet. It's a real, genuine admission of not knowing. It's a posture of humility. So to just quickly recap, the believer owns their trust, the disbeliever owns their rejection, and the honest agnostic owns their uncertainty. Now, the really crucial thing to see here is that all three of these are presented as positions of integrity. Each one is accountable, each one takes responsibility. Okay, but this is where the whole argument takes a really critical turn, because our source material makes a very sharp distinction inside that agnostic category. It identifies a posture that it calls the lukewarm position. Look, the key takeaway here is that not all uncertainty is the same. There's a world of difference between a humble uncertainty, which is like a journey towards knowing, and a permanent suspension of judgment. One is just a stage, the other is a shelter. One says, I don't know yet, while the other one refuses to plant their feet anywhere. But, and this is critical, they still feel totally free to judge everyone who has taken a stand. And to really hammer this point home, the source material pulls out this famous line from the biblical book of Revelation. In this analogy, cold is rejection and hot is commitment. Being lukewarm, this permanent state of indecision, is seen as something else entirely, something way more problematic. And that right there gets to the heart of the problem, doesn't it? The issue isn't having doubts. The issue is trying to dodge all accountability. It's trying to stay exempt from taking a position while still looking down on everyone else's. And that just erodes the very integrity that makes trust possible in the first place. So you might be thinking, this is all very personal, very philosophical. But what's fascinating is how this whole idea of taking a responsible stand scales up. It builds from this personal thought experiment into the huge world of civic life. Because, as it turns out, societies have to do the exact same thing. They have to decide what they're willing to trust as their foundation. I mean, just look at this classic line from the U.S. Declaration of Independence. This is a perfect example of this principle at work. It doesn't say that rights are given by a government or decided on by a popular vote. Nope. It grounds them in something that came before the state, something outside of it. When you really break it down, that is a profound statement of trust, isn't it? Unalienable means they can't be taken away by any human authority. Our rights are trusted to a source that no government, no majority can just overrule. And that is what's supposed to make them last, no matter who's in power. A lot of people just focus on the Constitution, but the argument here is that you can't really have one without the other. They work together. The Declaration answers the why question. Why do we have rights? It establishes their source. Then the Constitution answers the how question. How do we protect them? It does that by restraining the government from messing with rights it assumes already exist. And this really gets to the core of what civic trust is all about. A stable society, according to this argument, can't just make up its own foundations from scratch. It has to rely on what's called a borrowed stability, a foundation that it inherits, one that it trusts, but didn't actually create. It needs something solid to stand on. So, all of this brings us right back to where we started, back to us. Let's just put theology and politics aside for 1 second and just think about the structure of trust itself. The big question is still there. Where do you stand? Look, the whole point of walking through this explainer isn't to argue that one of these positions, believer, disbeliever, or agnostic, is the right one. The real question is about integrity. It's about which of these stances is willing and able to actually bear the full weight of responsibility for the position it takes. Because the moment you truly get it, the moment the lights come on, so to speak, that neutral corner just vanishes. There is no such thing as a belief-free zone. Refusing to trust is a stance. Suspending your judgment is a stance. The very act of not choosing becomes its own kind of choice. And that leaves us with this one final, really powerful idea. This thought experiment doesn't demand that anyone walk through a specific door. The door stays open. It's open for you to reconsider, to move, to change, but it does insist on one thing, and it's this: no one stands nowhere.